turning now to the latest legal twist for the Trump administration, the Justice Department is now investigating whether White House officials may have been potentially bribed in exchange for government pardons. President Trump is calling the investigation fake news. Our Paula Reed has more on the federal documents unsealed by a judge yesterday.
20 pages of heavily redacted court documents show the Justice Department has been investigating a possible secret lobbying scheme in which certain people allegedly acted as lobbyists to senior White House officials to secure a pardon or reprieve of sentence for blank. The documents reference communications between people, including at least one lawyer, that were seized from an office that was raided sometime before the end of the summer. No one has been charged at this time. A DOJ official told CBS News that no government official was or is currently a target of the investigation. Earlier in the day, Attorney General William Barr was at the White House for 2.5 hours, meeting with Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. The White House says the meeting had been previously scheduled, but it came just after Barr's interview with the Associated Press, in which he said the DOJ had found no widespread fraud in the election.
By the president.
Barr, who is one of the president's most loyal supporters, told the AP the Justice Department has looked into complaints about the election, but has not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. Trump campaign attorneys Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis shot back, saying Barr's opinion appears to be without any knowledge or investigation. Judges across the country have dismissed the campaign's allegations of voter fraud for lack of evidence. But the campaign is relentless and continues to solicit money from supporters. There are multiple reports indicating the Trump campaign has raised about $170 million since Election Day. And when you read the fine print in those asks for donations, it shows most of that money goes to Save America, a political action committee formed by the Trump campaign last month that can be used to fund future political endeavors. Last night, President Trump alluded to just that in a speech at a White House Christmas party for mostly Republican National Committee members. You can hear him in this now private video.
But it's been an amazing 4 years. We're trying to do another 4 years. Otherwise, I'll see you in 4 years.
So Paula is joining us now with more from the White House. So Paula, we haven't heard from the Attorney General in a while, and then he shows up and we hear about the investigation hasn't turned up any voter fraud. He talks about John Durham. He doesn't even mention this other investigation, this alleged pay for pardon investigation. So you mentioned 20 pages, heavily redacted. What are federal agents reviewing, and who may be involved?
Well, this is a seriously redacted order from a federal judge. Several pages look just like this. You literally don't get to read a single word, but we have been able to glean a few facts. The fact is that this involves at least 2 individuals who allegedly were lobbying senior White House officials for a pardon for another person. But this order does not name names. We don't know who was involved in this alleged scheme, but they were allegedly funneling money to the White House or related political action committees in exchange for what they hoped would be a presidential pardon. Now, at this point, the administration is not commenting on whether they knew about this or if they were cooperating, but President Trump tweeted last night. He called this order from a federal judge fake news.
No surprise there. Paula, in an interview yesterday, Attorney General Bill Barr contradicted the president's unfounded claims of election fraud. How is the Trump campaign responding? What's the president's strategy now in continuing with these claims? I note, and as I noted earlier in the show, that now the Attorney General has become somehow part of the deep state because he is essentially not willing to throw away his legacy in the last remaining weeks of the Trump administration to say something that is unfounded and that has no proof.
Well, let's take the 2 separate issues there. First, Bill Barr's participation in the administration, his support for the President Trump. Then we can deal with how the campaign is responding. These allegations that Bill Barr is part of the deep state or he's trying to undermine President Trump, well, that just completely ignores his record during his time at the Justice Department. Remember, special counsel Robert Mueller, he didn't say much during his investigation, but one of the things he did say is that Bill Barr misconstrued his findings and that the way that the Justice Department characterized the results of his investigation really kind of favored the president and was not completely accurate. We have to remember Bill Barr also, the way he handled that criminal complaint that went to the Justice Department about the president's calls with dealing with Ukraine and pushing for investigations into his political rival, Joe Biden. We also have to remember Bill Barr has opened at least half a dozen reviews into political pet causes of President Trump, even though none of those have resulted in any prosecutions. Now, in terms of how the campaign is responding to Bill Barr, one of the president's most loyal supporters, they suggested Rudy Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, attorneys for the campaign, they said that Barr's opinion, quote, appears to be without any knowledge or investigation. But Barr specifically said the Justice Department has looked into complaints about the election. They are investigating, and their conclusion at this point is that they don't have evidence of widespread fraud. Now, later today, Rudy Giuliani will appear before Michigan lawmakers with additional allegations of voter fraud to talk about these theories that have been dismissed by judges across the country who say, look, they just don't have evidence. But as this goes forward, the campaign continues with these allegations, and they continue to be very successful with fundraising. There are reports they've raised nearly $170 million. But if you read the fine print on that, that can actually not only be used to help with this defense, it can also be used to fund future political endeavors. And as we saw in the package there, the president's already talking about 2024.
Yes, he is. You also mentioned in your piece that Barr visited the White House after he did that interview, and he announced the appointment of a new special counsel. I said Durham was a special prosecutor, special counsel. There is a difference. And this is, of course, into the origins of the Russia probe, the investigation into the investigators. Who did he appoint? Sort of gave that away. And, what's the next phase of this investigation?
Well, it's such an important distinction. A special prosecutor, independent counsel, special counsel, the rules, the statutes have evolved over time. As certain individuals have been appointed, sometimes Congress has wanted to go back and kind of revisit the oversight or the powers that these people have. Right now, we have a special counsel statute. And what's so interesting is that by appointing this U.S. attorney as a special counsel, and not just a U.S. attorney looking at some things, this means that his work will continue into the next administration, and he can really only be fired. This gives him additional powers, be fired by the attorney general, who would have to do it in writing and have a specific reason. So in doing this, not only does this investigation into the Russia investigation continue, but it puts the Biden administration in a tight spot because if they want to end this, they would have to do so in writing. There would likely be a political pushback. Some people are interpreting this move to say that perhaps there's additional evidence that the attorney general thinks deserves more or longer, lengthier review. The Justice Department has said the investigation has been narrowing to focus more on the conduct of FBI agents who worked on the Russia investigation. But one could also say that if there was any there, that they probably would have brought it out already, and perhaps that extending this work and handing the Biden administration a special counsel to look into the FBI, it's a little bit of payback.
Paula, let's talk about the future. The New York Times and others are reporting that the president has discussed with his advisors potential pardons for his 3 eldest children, for Rudy Giuliani. And now we're learning that a government watchdog group is also suing the president, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the White House to prevent them from destroying emails, phone messages, and other records from his time in office. What do we know about any potential pardons about this lawsuit? I sort of texted my mom yesterday and said, done a lot of things in my life, but at least nothing that rises to the level of a potential presidential pardon.
Preemptively.
Yes, preemptively.
The presidential pardon power is vast, Vlad. If you think there is anything you may have done or could have done, I can get you the address for the pardon office. It's a blank check that the president has. Maybe he'd write one for you. But the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who's now representing the campaign, he's denying these reports that he's asked for a preemptive pardon. He's, of course, been under scrutiny and investigation in New York by federal prosecutors who are looking into some of his financial practices. Though at this point, he hasn't been charged. Now, if you are preemptively pardoned, it would really only matter if someone, a federal investigator, federal prosecutor, wanted to charge you, because otherwise, well, it's just something that was written down, I guess, or was said to you. But it is likely something that could potentially go to the Supreme Court. If indeed there was a case that was to be brought against you, you had a preemptive pardon, it would probably be something the Supreme Court would have to sort out whether that is valid. But in keeping with the Lawyer Full Employment Act here, the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington have filed a suit against this administration. They are arguing that the Trump administration needs to more thoroughly and carefully preserve documents in this administration. They are calling on the White House to rescind a policy whereby you can just take a screen grab, for example, of certain information sent on non-official messaging platforms. Now, when it comes to official presidential records, you are supposed to keep these for the government. They're not your personal property. But there is a policy here that you can take a screen grab and that will suffice. But a screen grab, they say, doesn't have the metadata, and they argue it's not a complete record. So that is a case that is now pending. There have been similar questions about record preservation and about those other messaging apps, those non-official channels. I can tell you I've absolutely had officials in this administration reach out to me on those non-official channels, and it's just unclear whether actual records are being kept of WhatsApp messages, Signal messages, those kinds of things.
So, Paula, just to clarify, and let me ask you to put on your lawyer hat for just a moment. So, if the president issues you a blank presidential pardon, those are for, as you pointed out, something that a prosecutor might want to indict you for, and it only covers what, the period that you worked in the White House, and it doesn't cover anything that you did before you were working for the Trump administration, and it doesn't cover you for anything after.
So look, we're in the realm of things that would really have to be decided specifically by the Supreme Court. The president could try to preemptively pardon people, right? He could say, I preemptively pardon you from any and all federal offenses that you may one day face. But that really only matters if someone wants to charge you with a crime, and if they did, and they didn't think that pardon should apply, then it would be likely a question that would have to be decided by the Supreme Court. If, for example, you know a specific crime you might be up for, then yes, the president could potentially try to pardon just from that particular crime. But we really are sort of in not completely, but largely uncharted territory. I had a discussion with a Justice Department official way back in the later days of the Obama administration, because there were questions about whether he could preemptively pardon Hillary Clinton. And the answer was, yeah, probably, but it'll likely go to the Supreme Court. And that was someone inside the pardon office at the Justice Department. A lot of academics have different theories, but the pardon power is vast. And one thing the president has done repeatedly throughout this administration is test the boundaries of executive power. President Obama certainly did that, and President Trump has done it, gone even further to test the limits of his authority. But most importantly, these pardons only apply to federal charges. So if you've done a crime that could potentially be charged at the state level, particularly in a state that is of a different political party, political pardons, it's not a completely get out of jail or stay out of jail free card.
And I know that
it's funny you use that phrase, because I was thinking, I don't know if we should be looking to the Supreme Court or the Monopoly rule book to find out just how long you can hang on to that card. It doesn't exist in real life. It's only in a game.
Yeah. And I know Ross, our producer, is wanting us to wrap, but just in 20 seconds, Paula, so if you pardon somebody preemptively, does that assume that you've committed a crime? Like, are you guilty?
Well, I mean, we're really just, this is a hypothetical land, right? It doesn't mean that you're guilty. You're not guilty until you've pleaded guilty or been proven convicted by a jury of your peers. So just because you're pardoned for something or preemptively pardoned, it doesn't mean you're guilty. But it sure looks that way, right? And there are concerns about how the president will be using his pardon power over the next several weeks, if he will apply it to some of his associates, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, people who have in some cases pleaded guilty and been convicted of crimes during this administration.
You know, Paula, I always feel smarter after I talk to you, whether it's just in person or on the air. And since I haven't seen you in person in like 9 months because of this pandemic, it's really, really great to have you on our air every morning. Thank you so much.
Of course,
Yes.
thank you.